Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you a new build in my series Building Nancy Drew in The Sims 4. Today we are building Big Island Mike's Immersion Excursion from Nancy Drew, the Creature of Kapu Cave. So this is one of the main locations in the 15th game in the Nancy Drew series, and this location is in Hawaii. So this is our first kind of tropical style build, and I knew immediately that I was going to build it in Sulani, which is the world that came with the Sims 4 Island Living. I knew Sulani would be perfect for this kind of build, and I knew that I would be using a lot of the items from the Sims 4 Island Living. So that's really going to be the major aesthetic that we see in this game. Definitely very island inspired. I do build the entire kind of main area of Big Island Mike's Immersion Excursion that we see in the game, and then I do a little bit of an expansion as well. It's interesting because the the world of Sulani only has 40 by 30 lots and then like 50 by 50 lots. There isn't a 40 by 40 lot, which I think would have been the perfect size for a build like this. But instead, I had to build it on this 40 by 30 lot, which actually ends up working quite well. I'm actually quite happy with how it turned out. In the end, it does feel a little squished together, but I kind of like that in a way, because then what it does is it makes the whole space feel utilized, which I love. Having empty space is not something that I'm a huge fan of in The Sims, just because, I don't know, it just looks so empty. Then it looks like a set or something. And I suppose that's what the spaces technically are in the games, but in The Sims, my goal is to make it a good Sims build in addition to also being true to the games. It's funny because this game, it's no secret really, this game is one of my lesser favorites of the series. It's in my bottom 5 when I rank all of the Nancy Drew games, but I think this build is one of my favorite builds that I've done so far in The Sims 4. I really love how it turned out. I love how cohesive the aesthetic it is. I love how similar it looks to Big Island Mike's, but then I also love how I was able to expand it. So I hope that you guys really like this build as well. I had a lot of fun with it and ended up being so happy with it. Here, I'm just kind of working on the main entrance to Big Island Mike's. I did fiddle around with these poles for quite a while because I wanted there to be poles in front holding up the awning, but none of the columns were the right size, so I had to get a little bit creative. I started for this build just by working through it step by step based on how Nancy navigates Big Island Mike's when she arrives to it. So she starts by coming up at this entrance to the building itself, and then this main building that I've started to build here is kind of like a office space, kind of like a reception area for Big Island Mike's Immersion Excursion. For those who have or haven't played the game, Big Island Mike's is like a resort where he basically makes his guests make shell necklaces, get fish, and they sell those items to him, and then he gives them Big Island bucks, which they can then use to buy more bait or buy more shells or buy presumably other things like food or snacks or shaved ice. So he's kind of got a sneaky system going on here. I don't know really if I would enjoy a system like that. I do like the idea of having kind of like an eco-tourist kind of space where I would go and I would learn about the local culture, and I would learn how to do things based on how that local culture has lived in that area for however many years. I do like that idea, but I'm not crazy about the idea of selling those things to Big Island Mike, which he probably then sells for an even bigger profit. Like, he's taking the necklaces that his guests make and is probably selling them on Etsy, for all I know. Or he's taking the fish and he's going into the local market and he's selling them for a profit, whereas his guests are just getting these Big Island bucks, which they then give back to him and he continues to make profit off of stuff. I don't know. Shady business practices, Big Island Mike. I'm not a huge fan of your shady practices. I am, however, a fan of how the resort itself looks. So I really did take the resort idea of this location and fully expand on it. So after we start to finish kind of this main area of the resort, I add some other areas to make it really a fully functioning resort. And I assume those areas would have to exist in the games as well because, I mean, the people who are visiting Big Island Mike's Immersion Excursion would need a place to stay. Realistically, they wouldn't just not have a place to stay, so that's definitely the part that I had a lot of fun adding onto. But right now we're working on the inside area where Big Island Mike kind of has his main counter area. This would be where people check in and where they give him their shell necklaces or the fish that they've caught and everything based on his shady business model, which again, we've gone over. We don't need to cover it again. But in here, I had a lot of fun just kind of filling in this space. I was able to find a few items that actually really reminded me of the inside of this area itself. I wanted to get a game in here that reminded me of the Wiki Tiki game, which is honestly one of my favorite parts of the game. There's a lot of parts that I'm critical about, but the Wiki Tiki game I think is just adorable. It's basically just electronic rock, paper, scissors, but with these fun little Wiki Tiki characters. And the song is extremely addictive, and now that I've thought about it, it's gonna be in my head for the rest of the day. That's my fault, but it's probably in your heads now too if you've played the game. Wiki Tiki, oahu, oyahi. It's probably aren't even the words, but yeah. You know the song. It's a lot of fun, and I wanted to include a version of it, so I spent a whole ton of time looking through the debug menu trying to find like an arcade game of some sorts. I tried putting some of the other arcade games that we do actually have in the game in, but they were just too big. What I do eventually end up finding are a couple of ATMs that I put together. So in my mind, I'm pretending that it's the Wiki Tiki game, but realistically, they're just ATMs, which I don't think your Sims could actually use. But the idea of them also being ATMs is also kind of good because it's a functional thing that could be used inside of the resort itself. Like people would probably need to get cash if they wanted to go on excursions outside of the resort. A lot of places that rely heavily on tourism have a lot of excursion type places where you like often will deal just only in cash or things like that. So it probably would be very handy to have. I loved putting this calendar on the wall because it looks almost exactly like the one that Big Island Mike actually has behind the counter, which is hilarious to me. I love that it looked so similar. He doesn't have any flooring, so the flooring is literally just the basic cement flooring that we have in the game. And then I use this violin to look like a ukulele because there's a ukulele sitting on a table. But again, we don't have ukuleles in the game, but we do have violins. So I thought that I would just use that as kind of a placeholder for that idea. As I'm doing more and more of these builds, I'm definitely getting more used to the idea of taking creative liberties. I think that's something that I've mentioned in a lot of the last few videos that I've done, but that's what's making these videos even more fun to make, is knowing that I can't get them exactly perfect, but I can get them pretty darn close, and it's okay if things aren't exactly right, but they get the idea across. So similarly here, instead of having the two little machines where you can use your Big Island bucks to learn things about the island, again, why not just like tell us about the island, Mike? Why do we need to use Big Island bucks to pay for it? But instead of having those, I just put a little radio and then I put a little TV. So again, there's like some functional Sims objects that they could actually use. I mean, they could listen to the music while they're hanging out. Mike could put on some island music and have it playing in this little lobby area. I wanted to clutter up the desk with a lot of just kind of papers and books and notebooks and even little awards. I figured that that little hummingbird award was just for like an award that he won for an ecotourism kind of place, which was really fun. And then just adding in a couple of benches on the side here to fill in the space and then also kind of mimic the rest of the inside of this main building. Because this really isn't the resort part. This is just where you check in. I also got a lot of really good use out of the Jungle Adventure wall arts that I've been putting around. So they have kind of designs on them that I think are really cool. They're similar in style to the islands of Sulani. Selva Dorada is the world that came with the Sims 4 Jungle Adventure, and both are inspired by kind of just like ocean nations and Latin America. They have definitely those influences, so I figured that those packs worked quite nicely when trying to put this together. And then I just added on that closet in the back that poor Joe tries to get into and doesn't have the greatest luck if you've played the game. Good old Joe Hardy. And now we're moving on to kind of finishing the other outdoor areas of the resort itself. I wanted to try and get the proportions as close as I could to what we have in the game, and I think it ended up working out quite well. It's funny too because this whole lot is just a sandy lot, which ends up working great for the beach area because that's exactly what I needed for it. But when you walk around the resort itself, there actually is, it's primarily grass, which I hadn't really noticed before, but it's primarily grass, and even when you go out onto the main area, it's a lot of very tall grass, which I don't know, is kind of interesting. So I decided to put the grass inside the area. It's kind of a sunburned grass, so it's not super bright. And then I maintained some of the landscaping that I noticed was at the front of the build when I was working on the kind of that main building there where Big Island Mike stands. So lots of big orange flowers, the little pink flowers, kind of the palm trees, those cactusy aloe looking plants. I'm not sure what those are, but there are some that look exactly like it in the game, so I was really excited to find those. And then I just rely on those for landscaping the entire lot, as well as those bushes with the yellow flowers that came with Island Living. I use those to kind of fill in the edges of the lot and really make it, or try to make it feel really cohesive and filled in. Very lush, which is funny because when I play this game, I don't think of Big Island Mike's as being very lush, but when I actually looked at the screenshots and went through my walkthroughs for making this, I realized it actually is a pretty lush space, surprisingly. Obviously, the jungle where Nancy goes with Quigley Kim is very lush because, you know, it's a jungle, but I just hadn't thought of the resort that way, so I kind of enjoyed that part of it. I figured we would need to fill in this side of the main building as well, so I just put another bench on there, a little bit of wall art. I did add a couple other windows on the side too. Those aren't there in the original game itself, but I think it looks nice and it brings more air and more light into the building itself, which in The Sims definitely is helpful. The more actual indoor light you can get, the nicer it looks for your Sims. So definitely wanted to do that. Thought it added a nice little touch. This little area is typically the shaved ice station, and we surprisingly do not have a shaved ice kind of thing in The Sims 4. So instead what I did is I put this grill here and I built it into these counters, and then I added the kava bowl so you can have a kava party. And I added the ice cream machine. So your Sims can make ice cream, which again, I feel like gets across the idea of the shaved ice. I mean, it's a cold snack either way. So your Sims can make ice cream, and the grill is actually super important because that's the primary way that your Sims can make food for themselves if they were staying at this as a resort. We don't have actual resorts in The Sims 4, but you can sometimes pretend that your Sims are going to a resort just by, keeping them there overnight at the lot. So if you have a lot that's kind of, coated like a park or something, or a beach, they can typically stay there through the night and you can pretend that they're hanging out at a resort, as long as they don't have like children at home, maybe? But then maybe again the children would just be a daycare, so I guess even then you can do it, which would be super fun. I really like the idea of bringing some Sims here and having them come here on like a little vacation. If you haven't watched the most recent episode of Let's Play The Sims 4 Nancy Drew, Joe Hardy and Iola did just get married, so I think that having them come here for their honeymoon might be really fun. I think that's probably what I'm going to do in the next Sims 4 Let's Play the Nancy Drew episode, just because this feels like a really nice vacation spot, and I love the idea of bringing some Sims here, and I really had that kind of functionality in mind as I was building it. Every time I pause, I'm looking up screenshots from my walkthrough to try and fill in areas for the game. So like these areas here in the actual game, in Creature of Kapu Cave, the area on the left is a jewelry making station, and then the area on the right is kind of like a little station where you can buy bait and you can buy souvenirs and other things like that. So I keep kind of the same functions essentially. So the one on the left I end up using as like a little crafting space, and the one on the right I do just fill some tables with things that look like you could buy them as souvenirs or things like that, which was definitely fun. And then over on the other side, I put those lounge chairs rather than just having regular sitting chairs, so your Sims could totally hang out there, do some sunbathing. They can nap in the lounge chairs, which I think is super fun. And then here I instead, because we don't have a jewelry making station, your Sims can't make jewelry. Shocking, I know. Instead of that, I just put the woodworking table, so then they can still craft things. I think I end up putting an art easel too, so then they have more options for things that they can create. Yep, so I put an art easel here as well. I thought about using things from other packs, but up to this point, I really hadn't had to use other packs quite as much. Beyond Island Living and base game, I really hadn't had to go much farther beyond that. So in a way, I limited the packs that I used. I definitely didn't entirely, so it's very possible that there's a couple random things here and there from other packs, but for the most part, it's primarily Island Living stuff. And that's why I decided not to go with like the candle making station from Eco Lifestyle, for example, just because that's not... that would be one thing from the pack as opposed to just using a base game item. So now I'm filling up these tables with things that I figured your Sims could buy. You could probably make this a retail lot because there is a bathroom, there is a cash register. I did give Big Island Mike a cash register. And there are all of these items that you could sell. So you could very easily turn this into a retail lot, I feel like. And you could sell these items out on these tables. You could probably also put things inside of the actual building and use those to sell. But I figured things that Sims could use and buy that would make sense here. I mean, sunscreen makes sense. And then the fish food there is supposed to mimic the bait because, haha, it's fish food. And that's what the frog is supposed to be as well. I mean, you can use frogs as bait often. I put some towels over on the other side, so like you could buy some beach towels, and then over on this side was souvenirs. So like these little decorated skulls, which I think are really pretty. And then I think I ended up putting a pile of clothes, so it's like you could buy a t-shirt. And then these kinds of lotions or something like that. Just maybe they're made by a local artisan of some sort who makes homemade lotions and things like that. So now we've pretty much finished the main area of Big Island Mike's actual resort, and now we're moving on to kind of the beachy area. So this right here is the dock that you can fish off of. At the very, very end of the video, I do put a fishing sign at the end of the dock, so it is actually a functional fishing spot, which I think is kind of fun, so your Sims can absolutely go stand at the end of this dock and fish. I looked for it here, but for some reason my debug menu had like... Actually, no, I wasn't looking for that there. Just kidding. I was looking for something that would mimic Pua's shack, because Big Island Mike's daughter, Pua, has a surf shack. And we don't have surfing on The Sims 4, so I didn't have anything that I really could put in there, and we don't even really have surfboards or anything like that, any kind of decoration like that at all. So rather than having the surf shack, I decided to do, here I have just a public bathroom space, but then eventually I realized that the little resort area that I have, the little cabanas have their own bathrooms, so it didn't really make sense to me to have a public one, and I figured I could get something more functional out of that space, and so I end up changing it to a bar. So again, just trying to find ways to make this as functional of a Sims location as I possibly can. Functional in the idea that Sims would come here, they would hang out, they would go to the beach, and they would maybe even stay here. So over on the side here, this part was so fun. I really loved doing these little cabanas. I end up fitting 3. So Big Island Mike could host 3 different groups of 2 at a time. Each one only has a double bed. So, I mean, if Frank and Joe came here, they were sharing a bed, which, you know, that's fine. They're brothers. They share a bed. No big deal. But it was a little too squishy to get in single bed, so I decided to just do basically the same design for every single cabana. And they each have a double bed, they each have their own bathroom, and they each have a little kitchenette, which I thought was kind of cute too. And then I'm using this greenery here to kind of create landscaping areas. I've noticed that it's kind of helpful to mark out where you want landscaping to be, and then it can kind of naturally fall as you start to place plants. So yeah, that's what I end up doing with the landscaping eventually, but right now we are working on the interior of the cabanas, and basically I'm just using a ton of island living. Decorations, wall paint, roofing, doors, windows, furniture. Basically, all of it is island living, and I just love how it turned out. I would totally stay in one of these little cabanas. I think it would be so fun. It would be a great honeymoon spot, which again is why I think that Joe should definitely come here. It just seems like such a romantic little spot. It seems really cozy, and I love the idea of it. So I start by just doing the shells of all of them, and I complete one of the cabanas, and then I just copy it over to the other 2 just to save time. It kind of makes sense that they'd be all essentially the same anyway. That's really how it is in hotels, I mean, and resorts. You just kind of have basically a generally similar design pretty much everywhere. So I'm able to fit in a bed, an end table, and a light for each one. Put in kind of like a fun rug, really just going with all of the island living stuff that I could possibly muster. Cute little chair here in the corner. I love this little wicker chair from Island Living, but I feel like because it's wicker, I don't use it probably as often as I would like to. And then here I have a little kitchenette. So I do use a mini fridge from the university expansion pack, and then put a little microwave in here, a little sink. So you can imagine that Sims who would stay in these little cabanas could very easily like make their own lunch. They could make a fruit salad. They could store ingredients in their little fridge and bring it out to the grill. They could go fishing, and then they could grill themselves some fish and then put it in their little fridge as leftovers. And all you would have to do in order to accomplish all of that and make it feel like this is your little cabana for the vacation is just lock the outside door for your Sims in your household, which I think is really fun. I did play test everything too, so even though the bathroom ends up looking a little bit cramped, I tested and everything does work, which is great. It's just a standard bathroom. I thought about using the stylized Island Living stuff, but they only have a bathtub, and I didn't really like that the sink didn't have any storage because that didn't feel realistic to me. Realistically, I feel like the sink would have to have like a couple extra towels in there and like some of those little prepackaged soaps and shampoos and stuff for guests to use. Because even though Big Island Mike is a very stingy person who steals all of our earnings, I have to imagine that he would at least provide his guests with soap. So, hopefully I'm not giving him the benefit of the doubt and he actually does provide his guests with soap, because I think that would be important. So that's basically the little cabana's done. I'm just copying over all of the roofing and fixing up the walls and everything. And then the way I delineate them is by putting these wall arts from Jungle Adventure on the outside. So like Big Island Mike could say, okay, you're staying in the avocado cabin. Some of my viewers are big fans of avocado toast and have gotten me into being fans of avocado toast, so the avocado cabin is available for rent at Big Island Mike's Immersion Excursion. There's also the little deer one, and then I think just like the sun cabin, and I just really like that idea. I've always thought it would be so fun to own like a resort or a bed and breakfast. I just love that idea. I think when I eventually get around to making the Golden Gardenia for Message in a Haunted Mansion, I'm just going to have so much fun imagining what the completed project would be like as a bed and breakfast, actually, because in the game it's still very much in the renovation process. And I don't know, I love bed and breakfast. I just love that idea. I love how cozy they are. I love how homey they feel. And I love the idea of being able to stay in such a historic place and just relax and just, you don't have any responsibilities of cleaning everything up or cooking. You can just be. You can chill. And you can do that here at Big Island Mike's Immersion Excursion. There you go, Mike. I'm giving you some business. You can just be. You can simply be at Big Island Mike's Immersion Excursion. But that's definitely the vibe that I was going for. I wanted it to feel really cozy, even though he keeps you busy, as he likes to say. I wanted this to feel like a really good vacation spot. So, pulling in the same landscaping that we use throughout. Again, I used the green kind of terrain paint to make it feel like there's grass with the landscaping, and then it kind of slowly fades away as it gets to the sandy areas. So that's what I was trying to accomplish with this, and I continue to use the same orange, pink, and yellow flowers that I used on kind of like the interior area, I suppose, the area that's fenced in for Big Island Mike's. And then I use that around on the outside as well. And then I just put these cute little aloe plants. I don't know what they actually are, but they look like little aloe plants to me, just along the edges. And then you would walk along that sandy path to get to whichever cabin you are staying in. Okay, here's where I was actually going in to go and look for the fishing sign. So I do find an island living fishing sign. Specifically, I wanted to make sure it was actually island fish that were swimming around. I have no idea which sign I picked, but there are island fish swimming around. And now we're adding in basically the final touches to make this a functional, fun Sims resort. So I'll put in boats, I put in the bar, I put in some towels, and I just kind of fill in the space so that your Sims can have a glorious vacation here at Big Island Mike's Immersion Excursion. The number of times that I've had to say that whole name, goodness gracious. Big Island Mike better thank me for giving him so much free business. I feel like this is going to be a hoppin' place for the Sims. All right. Anyway, fellow detectives, thank you so much for watching. I do hope that you enjoyed this build. Like I said, even though this is one of my least favorite games, this is one of my most favorite builds that I've done so far. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you liked it as well. If you did enjoy this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up. That kind of engagement really helps us find more fellow detectives as the channel grows. Please feel free to write me a comment and let me know what you thought of this build, or if you have any ideas for me. And if you aren't subscribed yet, please feel free to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell for more Nancy Drew and Sims content. You guys are such amazing fellow detectives. This community means so much to me, and I just love that you enjoy these videos nearly as much, if not more, or exactly the same. Just enjoy them just as much as I love making them. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I hope you enjoy the screenshots, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.